Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni to network and connect amongst their alumni groups. And this show is all about, we interview former collegiate and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey and their transition out of sport into entrepreneurship and business leadership. And it's such a major issue today, mental health, financial literacy. So it's all about, we want to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. We're really excited today to have Josh Berger on. How you doing, Josh?
Doing well. Yeah, really excited to be with you today, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And so I think Josh, you might be my first tennis player. So I've had I think I was telling you before, I've had the gamut of, I've had racquetball players and windsurfers and NFL guys and Major League Baseball. So I think you're going to take the cake of the first tennis guy. So you're going to set the standard here.
It's an honor. It's an honor, and I know you're in South Florida, which is obviously a tennis hotbed.
Yeah, no doubt. In
I'll
fact,
try to the responsibility.
yeah, in fact, I'm right around the corner from where Chris Everett had her thing in Mission Bay in Boca Raton here. So, and then close to Delray. So Josh was a college tennis player at Clark University, and then when he got out of that, he got into coaching, ultimately coaching various youth and getting into doing some Division I coaching for tennis, and then. He got his master's in sports psychology, and ultimately he started his company, TieBreaker Psych, where he's the founder and the sports psychologist. So, Josh, I always like to ask, talk about playing sports and how it shaped you, like up into college.
Yeah, so growing up, always liked to follow and play a number of different sports. I remember growing up, I grew up in Connecticut. I used to wake up early and run outside and get the New York Times and look at the sports section and sort of read the stats and all of that. So would always be doing that and watching games and that sort of thing for different sports, baseball, basketball, football, different things. Tennis ended up becoming my main sport, and it was through some of the experiences from both playing, following some of these different sports, but especially playing tennis, where it's a one-on-one sport, and I think emotions can definitely run high, and I think we see that whether it's junior tennis, whether it's adult tennis at the club or the park, whether it's pros, the best players in the world. People can get frustrated, emotions can go up and down, and it was from some of these early experiences that really led me to the work that I do today as a sports psychology coach. But yeah, both playing competitive tennis, playing junior tournaments, playing in high school, playing in college, and then later coaching at different places, different tennis clubs at the Division I level for a couple of years at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, at the Tennis Hall of Fame as well. But yeah, it was through some of these experiences where I really started to recognize that the mental side of the game was, really an important aspect of athlete success, and could often be a difference maker between who ends up succeeding and who ends up not succeeding, or who ends up winning or losing when it really comes down to it.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, so did you dream about being a professional athlete? Was it tennis or was it another sport as a kid?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I think growing up, I would say probably baseball was the big one, probably followed by basketball. I used to go to 76ers camps. So I used to go for a few years to their camps. So definitely had, dreams of that. I don't know if I was ever really on that path per se. And then I found tennis and I started playing tournaments in eighth grade, which was, certainly later than some of my peers. So I think at that point, in eighth, ninth grade, I started, playing more tournaments, playing for my high school team. I think I sort of, I would have loved to play professional tennis, but I think I set my sights on college tennis, which felt like maybe a more realistic goal in a certain way, and also an exciting possibility at that time.
Yeah, and I always joke around. I say that I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, like, and but I said that unfortunately the talent wasn't there, so now I do podcasts. So let's talk a little bit about again, the show is about athletes transitioning out of sports, and I talked to a lot of the guests about when you were in college. Did you see any programs from Clark related to kind of helping athletes to ultimately transition out of sports? And I don't mean like just like the 1 day workshop, and whether it was tennis or any of the other sports that they played at Clark.
So I don't, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there was a ton of that sort of programming. I mean, they definitely provided different resources for the student body and for athletes on the physical side, on the mental side. But I wouldn't say that was necessarily the focus in terms of that transition from being a student athlete, where that's your life. You know, your life is, you know, being a student, trying to excel in the classroom, but also being an athlete, and also, you know, obviously you have your social life and everything else. And then all of a sudden you've graduated and you are, you know, and you're outside of that, you know, academic world. But no, I wouldn't say that that was the focus. And I really applaud, you know, your mission and, you know, Alumni Direct's mission of, you know, trying to help athletes bridge that gap where that gap so often exists. Because I think it's really important. And I think a lot of people, you know, struggle during that time where, you know, and you know, I think a lot of the sports psychology research shows this. And I think this is something I've seen as well with a lot of athletes that I work with, where, you know, oftentimes after an athlete finishes their career, whether they finish it at the pro level, whether they finish it at the college level, you know, before, you know, in high school or whatever it is, they really struggle. There's the identity piece that they can miss, that community of their teammates. And I really feel that, yeah, university colleges and universities could be doing a lot more to really provide assistance with that transition. So no, I wouldn't say that that my university had that, and I think that there's that universities ought to be doing a lot more in that space.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, like some of the stuff, and you know, we talked about it offline of just, you know, like what we're trying to do is bring together, you know, a resource partner team in the various in financial literacy and mental health and, you know, career services, some of these different areas that not only help the current athletes, but I think a lot of the alumni athletes get forgotten. So unless you're like a superstar athlete, they tend to get forgotten. So like we want to help them as well. So one of the other areas that, you know, I always talk about is networking, connecting. Talk a little bit about that, and especially the importance of doing that while you're still playing.
It's quite important. And I mean, I definitely, you know, again, looking back, you know, when you're between, I think it's easy to look back after you've left college and sort of think back to yourself between, let's say, the ages of 18 to 22. And, you know, for some people, it's a little bit older or younger, and maybe wish that you had done things a little bit differently. And I think you know, look back and I don't know if I maybe established, you know, or you know, established my network or networked in the best way that I possibly could have. You know, there were certain alumni from the tennis program, for instance, that you know, I connected with a couple of them, but didn't really maybe maintain relationships with them in the way that I could have. So I think that the opportunities were there. Like for instance, we would have a yearly um, sort of hit around, you know, semi-competitive tournament at each graduation year. So in May of each year, where, you know, certain alumni would be there and they'd hit with some of the current students and that sort of thing, and it would be pretty casual and light. But really, I think one of the, you know, some of the alumni would donate, and I think one of the purposes was to, you know, to help people build those connections. And I think some of the people on the team probably did that more than I did, certainly. So I think those opportunities were there, and I think in hindsight, you know, looking back, you know, 8.5 years since graduating now, which is a little bit crazy to say, that, you know, it would have been nice to have networked a little bit more, and I think um, those opportunities were there. But I think it's, you know, it's on the individual ultimately to take them, because it's not like they're handed to them. And I think sometimes, you know, when people's maturity between the ages of 18 and 22, people don't necessarily always
Right.
maybe take those opportunities or recognize the importance of those opportunities at the time.
Yeah, and we certainly encourage you know, the importance of that, and even starting like in high school. I mean, I just talk to people. You just never know. Like, you know, become friends with, you know, I mean, it could be your friends' parents, it could be coaches, it could be, you know, business leaders in the community, but definitely look to do that while you're young and while you're still playing too. Because you know, I've talked to some agents and they've just said that one of the biggest failures they've seen is where some of their players, and understandably so, they're zoned into their sport, but there is time that they could do is that they don't network and connect when they're playing, and then when they're done, like, okay, here you go, and I'm going to get this great job. I'm like, no, because you weren't prepared for that. So I think it's really important to do that, and you kind of kind of segue a little bit into like what you mentioned alumni. So obviously, like Alumni Direct, alumni engagement is really important to us. So what kind of did the school have efforts of? I know you mentioned like for the hit around it, like in general, did you see a lot of that where alumni would come back, but not only for like that one event, like the hit around, or for like a golf tournament, but maybe more so to work with the current athletes?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was that much of that as far as I saw. Maybe some of the more recent alumni, and then I think maybe a couple of select people that were maybe geographically closer to campus. But I wouldn't say that that was ever the sort of a main focus or something that was where they had a significant presence.
Yeah, it's is it any different today? Like, do you see have they kind of reached? I mean, a lot of people talk about alumni reaching out for fundraising stuff, but do they reach out to the athletes that you know of, or at least to you, to try to come back and engage?
Not so much. I mean, there's, I mean, there's, there's events like we talked about, which I think they continue to do in different ways, and donating and that sort of thing, but not in terms of sort of a continuous partnership throughout the year type of thing, where alumni can be helpful for connections and for job opportunities and for mentorship, or you know some of the things that you're talking about, mental health, financial literacy, really important things that I think our, this is just my personal opinion, that our school system maybe could be doing a better job of, maybe before college as well, of teaching people some of these really important life skills that I think it would be important, whether at whether a university provides, or sort of a an organization can provide some of these really important sorts of opportunities to people, so that they can learn some of these really important skills like you were talking about.
Yeah, I think it, and I see it as a two-way street. I mean, again, the athlete alumni or alumni in general, they need to want to come back as well. But I think it'd be great to see more programs encouraging that, and also for the alumni athletes themselves. As I alluded to with the whole, the networking, connector, even the transitioning, is that the ability for alumni athletes to interact with other alumni athletes that can help them out, even if it's across all sports. It doesn't have to be specific to that. To that one program. So let's switch gears. And one of the things that I always like to talk about is NIL, name, image, likeness, and a little bit of a controversial topic, but I think there's both the good parts and the bad parts. So give me your thoughts, both positive and negative.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll preface this by saying that I definitely wouldn't consider myself that knowledgeable about NIL, and I'm sure Rob, you could probably tell me more about it. But I think I come to it from somewhat of an interesting vantage point, in that I am based in a place currently that's had quite a bit of attention on it over these last 12 months or so, from a college sports standpoint. And I think in NIL is definitely a part of that, and that's Boulder, Colorado, where I'm sure many are aware of Deion Sanders coming in, and sort of the changes that that's brought. I mean, he was just named Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year, and there's an Amazon Prime show about him. Season 2 just came out, and I think he made a lot of changes to the community, brought a lot of excitement, changed a lot of things with the team, and hopefully next year they'll be better as well. But I know, a big part of that was some of these NIL deals that athletes were able to secure. And um, again, I'm definitely not an expert on this, and I know there's pros and cons of it, certainly. But from what I've seen, athletes are now able to be compensated for what they produce for the university, right? And I know with Dion, and sort of the changes to that team, they talk about millions and millions and millions of dollars to the campus and to the Boulder economy. And I know that's, college athletes, especially, select sports like football and basketball. And, there's some others, really have the ability to bring in, tremendous amounts of money to universities, but also communities.
Right.
And I think it's my view that they do deserve some sort of compensation for that, especially because they don't, their future is never certain, right? A lot of athletes, maybe they have professional ambitions and maybe they get injured and they never make it there, or maybe they, and I understand that college scholarship is a form of compensation, and I get that, but just like a professional athlete is compensated, oftentimes very, very generously and very significantly. I think college athletes ought to be compensated in a similar way if they can make a similar impact. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, I just saw, I think it was the University of Utah. They just gave, I forget which
The
car company,
trucks.
but they gave
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was, I think the choice of either a brand new truck or brand new SUV to
Right.
every member of their football, basketball, and gymnastics teams, which is a
Wow.
game changer for a college student,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know some of these NIL deals are millions of dollars, and these are obviously not for everybody, right? These are for the superstars, and I get that, and I get that that these are the NIL deals that we hear about, right? We don't hear about I played at the Division 3 level. I don't think that exists in that same way there, right? We're hearing about the top of the top, the 1%, so to speak. So yeah, no, I think there's definitely benefits. I definitely think that there are there's definitely a strong case to be made that athletes ought to be compensated. But I do also recognize that there's drawbacks. I know a lot of athletes are transferring now, which I know can there's definitely some on the academic side, and obviously, there's a small portion of student athletes that will go on to have a professional career.
Right.
So the majority of them will be doing something other than playing their sport for their career. And I think there's certainly academic drawbacks from when so many athletes are transferring, and I think that NIL has seemed to increase that. And I know, like college football, for instance, the transfer portal right now seems to be busier than ever, from what I've heard. So I think that seems to be a drawback. And and Rob, I'd be very interested to hear. I know it's a topic that you talk about, so I'd be interested to hear some of your viewpoints, maybe for or against, for and or
Yeah,
against.
yeah, I think, and I actually have another podcast I do with a co-host called NIL for You, and we kind of geared around education. I think it's definitely positive. You are seeing more because now we're doing research and things like that for by other podcasts. There's a lot going on throughout different sports. More and more, you're seeing, like tennis, swimmers, runners. Like where in the past, most people hear about, like you said, the big deals, but there are other deals being made. There's some great things going on, like for NIL for Good, where these athletes are taking some of the portions of their NIL money and putting it back towards charities, which is great. I think that the drawback um, that I hear most about, and I think of, is just maybe the lack of education. Because it is new that there's challenges, like especially like on a financial side, like just paying taxes and setting up a company. There's things that people don't necessarily know about, and there's companies out there that are now trying to work with the athletes, especially at the high school level, and their parents, and just teaching them. I mean, we hear sad stories of people blowing their NIL money, and then just the repercussions of that. So that's kind of the downside. But it's interesting, and I think it's going to continue to get better. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on within the NCAA space and trying to set up regular things where they can be more part of it and helping the athletes. So it's going to be I guess, an interesting dynamic over the next several years. The other thing too is like the portals, like you mentioned. I think that's kind of challenging. It's kind of sad because guys are starting out, or women starting at one school and going to another school. And if it's about the money, that's kind of sad. If it's not, or I get if it's about playing time. I mean, not getting a chance, but there's a lot going on with that for sure. So one thing I've been I started asking on my podcast, which has been a fun question, is give advice to freshman Josh.
That's a good one. Give advice to freshman Josh. Um, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think freshman Josh was open to, from an academic standpoint, to different possibilities. I know I was interested in business. I know I was interested in psychology. Wasn't exactly sure what I was going to major in. So I think maybe having a few distinct rather than just maybe being broad, having a few distinct career ideas at that point, maybe whether that's sports psychology, whether that was something else, but having a few ideas where, instead it was junior year or so where I started thinking, okay, what am I going to do after I graduate? And I think a lot of people fall into that sort of trap. I think especially at, I went to a liberal arts university, and I think a lot of people, maybe outside of STEM, um, feel that way with with different types of liberal arts degrees where they I think some of the STEM roles some of the STEM um, degrees directly lead to specific jobs, and I think some of the liberal arts degrees are a little bit broader in that you know they can apply to different sorts of jobs. So I think from an academic standpoint, to have a few different maybe career paths as ideas, and maybe to within each of those maybe start reaching out to people, start maybe alumni, or others, and start building connections, start meeting people, even just having an informational interview so that I can meet people, learn a little bit about what they do, really see if, hey, is this something I might want to do one day, right? 18-year-old
Yeah.
old freshman Josh, I think that would be really interesting for me to talk to someone that does sports, like, that is a sports psychology coach, or to talk to someone that's, in business, or talk to someone that does, other forms of psychology, and to really see, okay, what do you do on a daily basis? Is this something I could see myself doing? So that's what I would say from an academic standpoint. I think probably I would suggest to do more networking, but also just you know, to build probably deeper networking connections. I think people, a lot of people, when it comes to networking, it's their network is a mile wide and an inch deep, in that
Yeah.
they reach a lot of people, and maybe they have a lot of connections on LinkedIn, or they have a lot of first interactions with people, but how often are they really checking in with these people?
Yeah.
How often are they really building that connection? How often do these connections really last for the long term? So I think finding select people that really good quality people, and trying to build that connection with them over time, investing in those relationships a little bit more. So that I would say probably those couple of things. I think probably from a tennis standpoint, there's I probably could have done more on the mental side, on the strength and conditioning side. I'm sure there's more in a lot of different ways. So I would say there's probably you know advice in different areas, but I would say, yeah, networking, and the academic side, academic slash professional side, I think there's definitely some important
I opened up
lessons
I
for.
opened up a can of worms there for you. I got
No,
Josh
it's
putting on
cool.
his I put Josh got his psychology hat on. So yeah, lots of great advice, and I would assume most of it too, because I always the second question is what would you tell senior Josh, but you probably covered a lot of what you tell senior Josh as well. But any other quick words on what senior Josh might have you tell him that you haven't already told freshman Josh?
I can keep this one a little shorter, because I think it's something that a lot of seniors and a lot of people struggle with, whether they're going from high school to college, whether they're going from college to the working world, or college to a graduate program, is take some pressure off yourself. I think there can be a lot of pressure during that stage. Suggestions I tend to give to pretty much every athlete I work with, because people, I think, probably tend to perform better under less pressure. So find ways to take pressure off of yourself. Control what you can actually control. Don't try to control everything. Recognize there's always things out of your control, and try to take some pressure off yourself. Enjoy the experience. Enjoy your journey. Enjoy where you are. Enjoy, being a senior.
Yeah.
It should be a fun year. You've built connections. You've made friends up to that point. Enjoy it, but also take some pressure off yourself. Don't feel like that first year out of college you have to achieve everything you want to achieve, or you need to make as much money as
Right.
you want to make, or that things take time. Be patient and take some pressure off yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great advice there. And so, um, talk a little bit about like so your transition out of sports. I mean, here you are, and this goes the same with any athlete. You played your whole life, and now you're kind of finished. I mean, again, you were coaching, so you were still kind of tying into it. How was that transition, and maybe give a couple words of advice on, and now you can put your psychology hat on as well as of these athletes, whether it's college or professional or even high school for that matter, but transitioning out of sports.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of that transition, I think really try to be clear about, what are some of your strengths. I think that's important. Be very clear about that. Again, I'll go back to that point I just said in terms of take pressure off of yourself, um, and and just try to, hopefully you have some sort of a network built. I think these days it's easier to build networks, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's other resources out there, such as, Alumni Direct. I think being able to, use what's at your disposal, whether it's your strengths, whether it's those resources, and then have conversations. You can cast a wide net. Have conversations with coaches, with teammates, with friends. Sometimes by talking to other people, they can help you understand what you're really good at, what makes you special, what makes you unique, and then it can be a little bit easier to really understand what could be a great fit for you in terms of the working world, or what sorts of jobs or roles could be good for you. So I think have different conversations. People tend to maybe pigeonhole themselves and think, okay, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do, that's it. But I think sometimes through having conversations, through meeting people, through networking, through engaging with people that really know you well, that can change, and you can start to come up with new ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, so what you're doing today. So you transitioned out, you got your, master's in sports psychology. And so talk about, your company, talk about TieBreaker Psych and some of the things you're doing, and then ultimately how people can find you.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, in terms of what I'm doing, I'm the founder and sports psychology coach of TieBreaker Psych, and essentially, I work with all different types of athletes. I work with individual athletes and teams, all about the mental side of the game. And these are athletes of different sports, different ages, different levels. Since I come from that tennis background, there are a lot of tennis players that I work with. It's probably close to half at any given time of the athletes that I work with, and then the other half is a wide range of different sports. I could try to list them all off. There's quite a few different ones, but yeah, I would say that really what I do is I work with athletes on building and developing different mental skills that they can utilize in different situations that they find themselves in. So, for instance, things like self-talk, things like routines, visualization, mindfulness, goal setting, preparation, how they reflect and recover from performances and hopefully learn from them. So help them build these different tools so that when they're in tough situations on and off the court or the field or whatever their playing arena is, that they feel equipped, that they feel like they have tools and they feel equipped and they feel ready to handle and tackle whatever situations are in front of them, rather than maybe feeling lost or overwhelmed by the situation. If you feel like you have developed some of these different skills hopefully ahead of time and you've built that foundation, it can hopefully be a little bit easier to navigate some of these situations.
And I would imagine you're probably, doing it, you could do it anywhere, right? Or do you have to do it specific to your state, or you could do it in different states? How does that work?
So I can do it anywhere. So I'm not a clinician. I'm not, a therapist. Or a clinical psychologist. So I am able, I'm a sports psychology coach, and really what that means is that I don't focus on the mental health side with athletes. I focus on the performance side.
Gotcha.
So because of that, it gives me a certain flexibility, which is really nice. I'm able to be anywhere. My athletes can be anywhere. I predominantly work with athletes from the U.S., but all around the U.S. and different parts of the country. Also, some international athletes, but I also can be anywhere. I was living in Connecticut, then I was living in Rhode Island. Then there was a period of time where I was traveling a little bit nomadic. Now I live in Boulder, but still travel quite a bit. And some of the time, that's with my laptop, and I'll do sessions from all different places. So definitely gives me a nice sort of flexibility that I like, that really fits in nicely with the lifestyle that I've built.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously it's the remote world opened up after the pandemic, and it's helped a lot of people. But it's in a very positive way. It's just being able to reach out and help as many people as you can. And how do people find you?
People find me different ways. They can go to my website, which is tiebreakerpsych.com. So TIEBREAKER PSYCH.com. I also have a podcast called Tennis IQ Podcast, which I'm the co-host of with Dr. Brian Lomax. And we both are sports psychology professionals that come from the field of tennis. We both come from a tennis background, both work with a lot of tennis players among other athletes, and we talk about the mental side of tennis. So people could check out Tennis IQ Podcast as well, check out Tiebreaker Psych. Trying to be a little more consistent on the social media side of things. So you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as well. That's just my full name there. And yeah, always happy to connect. I offer a free introductory session if anyone's ever interested. That's generally about 30 minutes long. As a chance for us to meet and really see if sports psychology sessions are something that people are interested in. And yeah, always happy to connect and have a conversation and take it from there.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. And then you can find us at alumnidirect.com, and you can find our show on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel. It's across all the different podcast networks. And I really encourage people to follow, listen, and view these podcasts. It's just such great information. The athletes like Josh and a lot of the prior athletes I've had across all sports, just giving a lot of good information. We really want to make an impact in helping athletes as they transition out of sports, and teaching, inspiring again that there is life after sports. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you again soon.